There's a lot of pretty crazy updates regarding the Daystar situation. Let's talk about some of the latest developments, what both sides are saying, and then at the end I'll share which side I agree with more. If you're not up to speed on what's going on with Daystar, basically Joni Lamb is the current president of Daystar, an extremely large and influential Christian organization, and Jonathan Lamb, Joni's son, and Suzy, Jonathan's wife, have accused Joni of several things, including covering up the sexual abuse of their 5-year-old daughter. And Joni, in response, has been threatening lawsuits against Jonathan and Suzy, as well as YouTubers such as Nick Jones who have been covering this story. There's a lot more aspects to all that's happening, so let's talk about some of them. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not endorsing or supporting anyone here. I'm just sharing what we know about what's happening. Laura-Lynn Thompson is a Canadian broadcaster who pulled her daily TV program from Daystar, citing ethical deficits in the network. Here's Laura talking about Jonathan discovering footage of a security guard at Daystar putting a tracking device on his car.
And this was very, very hard. I mean, we cried a lot, and it was really painful.
So I told you at the top of the show that there was a moment where God spoke to Jonathan's heart and said, I want you to do something. And it was something he'd never done before, to my understanding. And God asked Jonathan to go and to look. He was at work to go and to look at the cameras, the security cameras that were in the building. And so that's what he did. He put on the security cameras in the building in just enough time to see a security guard placing a tracker onto his vehicle. Take a look. It's quite an ominous moment, and it is actually this same security guard that ends up doing something else later, and we'll get to that.
Now, I don't know if Joni is actually the one who ordered this tracking device to be put on Jonathan's car, but it wouldn't be surprising considering the fact that Joni has already said that she was planning on suing Jonathan and Suzy for making defamatory statements about her and Daystar. Joni set up a meeting between her, Jonathan, and Jimmy Evans, who is the founder and president of XO Marriage, and he holds the title of lead apostolic senior pastor at Gateway Church, where Robert Morris recently resigned from due to serious allegations of sexual abuse against a minor. I think Jonathan secretly recorded this meeting, and it has gone pretty viral because of some really disturbing things we heard Joni and Jimmy say during this meeting. One theme was their insistence that Jonathan completely submit to Joni in everything, including in things that he finds to be morally wrong.
I've never been not submitted to you.
Yeah.
That's all I want to hear is that you're submitted to me. That's it.
You have not been submitted to her, Jonathan.
You have not been
That's
submitted.
why we're in this room right now.
That's why we're here.
But my point is, I love you, and I'm led by the Lord. And if
You're led by her.
I'm led by the Lord first.
Well, so if your leading of the Lord is telling you you can't submit to everything she says, then you have a personal conflict, like Suzy was saying. You're saying you're led by the Lord. In Daystar, can you imagine all these employees showing up every day and saying, well, I appreciate what you're saying, but we're led by the Lord, and we'll need to pray about that before we do it. Hey, get out of here.
But that's true, but I wouldn't ask an employee to do something that's against their conviction if they felt really strongly.
You do it all the time.
Like what?
You think they want to work every time you tell them to work? You think that all your employees want to do exactly what you tell them to do?
No, I'm talking about something that would be, if you had a conviction that it might be wrong in front of, like, under God's eyes.
Well, I think it would be wrong to ask them to sin, but
this is not a sin, and it's just like this pastor said, there were times when he was under authority that he didn't agree.
That's right.
But he submitted, and the Lord blessed him for that.
Yeah.
Because God works in straight lines. Yeah. And if you have
that's where I think that, that makes sense. Obviously I don't want to do anything that would be
well, you have been, and that's what we're telling you
considered
right now.
Witchcraft, but at the same time,
it is rebellion, it's a sin of witchcraft, it is stubbornness, it is idolatry, it is all those things. You know that you can trust me.
There are two disturbing things to note in what Joni and Jimmy are saying here. First, they're basically communicating the idea that Joni's authority is absolute, and there is pretty much never any reason to question her authority. And second, they seem to be completely ignoring Jonathan's point about not submitting to things that are morally wrong. They just say that whatever it is that Jonathan is concerned about, it's not a sin and it's not morally wrong, so he just needs to submit. Another really disturbing part of the meeting with Jimmy Evans was him describing Joni as the voice of God to Jonathan, and Joni agreeing with him. Joni made a response video where she claimed this never happened, but just keep watching to see the obvious proof of the kind of language that Jimmy and Joni used during this meeting.
Well, then a lot of people talk about the voice of God analogy that was used because...
Yes, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, the voice of God. I am not...
Since when you became the voice of God?
I am not the voice of God.
Please.
But what Jimmy was saying is that I am the voice of authority at Daystar.
Yes.
He wasn't saying I was the voice of God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Submission means she's the voice of God to you. What she says is God in Daystar. This is the voice of God in Daystar.
You know,
wait a minute, Jonathan.
I have a kind of...
She's the voice of God in Daystar.
No.
She is God's voice to you here on this property and related to Daystar Network. She is God's voice.
He wasn't saying I was the voice of God.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the voice of God.
No, Joni is not the voice of God in any way. She may be Jonathan's mother and employer, so she has some degree of authority over him. But using the phrase voice of God completely crosses the line. Also, Jonathan is married with children and isn't a young boy who is still in Joni's house. So even her authority over him as a mother is completely different now at this stage of his life. At one point in Joni's response video to try to clear her name, she said that she has absolutely no regrets about anything she has said.
But I will just say on the record, I don't regret anything that I said.
So she has absolutely no problem with using this kind of authoritarian language towards Jonathan, and doesn't think it crossed the line, which it pretty clearly did. I have some significant problems with Julie Royce's reporting, but she's been at the forefront of covering this Daystar situation, so I think it's worth sharing something she put together that summarizes her view of what's happening.
While at Daystar TV, Jonathan and Suzy Lamb claimed that they were spiritually abused by Jonathan's mother, Daystar president Joni Lamb, and her close allies. This included Jimmy Evans, founder of XO Marriage. In July 2023, Jonathan and Suzy refused to read a listener comment praising Joni's recent marriage to sex therapist Doug Weiss. The couple objected to the marriage, believing that Weiss lacked biblical grounds for divorcing his wife. But in audio obtained by the Roy's report, Evans pressures the couple to submit to Joni, claiming she has godlike authority.
And submission means she's the voice of God to you. And
I'm sorry, can you clarify? She said she's the voice of God to me?
She's the voice of God.
So God's voice is...
So I have to hear, I can't hear from God, I have to hear from her?
Outside of Daystar. What she says is God in Daystar. This is the voice of God in Daystar.
But what accountability does she have if she's off?
Well, she has a husband. She has a board.
I'm on the board.
Yeah, but you're not individually, you're not her accountability. Individually, you're her employee.
For more information, see the article linked in the comments.
Jimmy says Joni has a husband and a board, and when Jonathan points out that he's on the board, Jimmy basically discounts that as not being enough to actually provide accountability to Joni's actions. Joni also reported that there was an SUV in front of Jonathan and Suzy's house, watching them, which seems like pretty blatant intimidation. Because their kids needed to go to school, Jonathan Lamb and Suzy Lamb returned home, and this is what they've had to deal with, an SUV just sitting there watching. Our next story will have documentation of other similar surveillance and tracking. Joni has made some responses to the things that Jonathan has accused her of doing. Here's an official statement that Joni released in response to one of the allegations against her. Today, yet another false allegation is being pushed by Jonathan, this time relating to expenses for my honeymoon. With the assistance of a blogger, Jonathan claims that Daystar paid for my honeymoon with Doug. The truth is that I used credit card points to pay for my honeymoon, leaving a balance owed to Daystar. I fully paid that balance. A key detail Jonathan omitted because it does not fit his narrative. The fact of the matter is that all charges by me on a corporate credit card that are personal in nature are fully accounted for and are always reimbursed by me. The same was true for any personal expenses incurred by Jonathan during his tenure. This has been and will always be the accounting practice at Daystar. In fact, Daystar's finances are subjected to an independent third-party audit by an accounting firm on an annual basis. When I first read Joni's response about using Daystar funds to pay for her very expensive honeymoon, I had some questions, some of which are summarized pretty well by Julie. First, Joni admits that she used points accumulated on a Daystar credit card for her own personal use. How are points accumulated on a company card not the property of the company? And how does that square with not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon? Second, I included Daystar's statement that Joni repaid the charges in my article, but I reached out to Daystar 3 times asking for 2 things: documentation and the date Joni repaid the charges. Daystar produced produced zero documentation and did not disclose the date. Third, Jonathan Lamb said he objected to Daystar paying for honeymoon at a board meeting in August 2023, a month after honeymoon. Joni was at the meeting, but according to Jonathan, a board member decided to gift $100,000 for the honeymoon to Joni. There reportedly was no objection. And here is Jonathan referring to his objection to Daystar paying for the $100,000 honeymoon at a meeting including the board member who reportedly decided to gift the honeymoon to Joni. Again, there was no objection.
I respect her position as the CEO of Daystar. That's never been a question. On the show today, she was actually kind of throwing me under the bus by saying that one of the challenges she's been dealing with is that people will not always submit. But I emailed her back. I just said, Mom, I've always submitted to you, even when I don't agree. I didn't agree that Daystar paid your $100,000 honeymoon. I didn't agree that Daystar paid for $5,500 of Rachel's personal photography expenses. I didn't agree with Doug being the co-host of Ministry Now, but I've submitted to that. The only where I draw my line is the Word of God, and I will never compromise on the Word of God. And that's where I stand.
Well, I mean, I think there would have to be, I think one of the reasons I'm here is just to paint all the pictures that are out there so, both sides can see, so everybody can see what the issues are and try to figure out how to resolve.
I think that's a great thing.
And we really wanted to do that. And you know what? Your mom's not in here. This gives us a chance to really try to do, but
There is additional information that has been revealed that raised some questions about Jonathan and Suzy's initial story about the alleged sexual abuse of their 5-year-old daughter. Here is what Rachel Lamb, who appears to be the wife of the person nicknamed Pete, has shared. Breaking. Julie Roys has issued a retraction on key elements of the article she wrote about my mom and our family. There is a lot more to this story. Here's what you need to know. Breaking news. Julie Roys issues a major retraction. Rachel shares a post from Dr. Malachi who posted, breaking news. After Joni addressed the accusations made against her by Julie Roys and others, the Roys report made a very critical correction to their original article that casts doubt on everything. Why is this correction buried at the end of the article? Correction. Our initial report said Pete was alone in the room with Jonathan and Suzy's daughter. Pete was holding a baby in his arms and Jonathan and Suzy's son was on the bunk on the opposite side of the room. Then Rachel posted a video clip from Jonathan and Suzy's interview with Marcus Rogers where they explained why they originally left out this detail from the original report.
I had told the journalist this part, but we didn't make it public because we want to leave children out of the story. There was another child, he was holding his kid in his arms. I'm not going to get into that, but it's almost like it was a non-factor.
Suzy's own admission. She told Julie Roys Pete was holding a baby, her 8-year-old son was in the room, but these critical details were left out of the article. Julie Roys' original article claims Pete was alone with their daughter. So who is lying? Did Suzy and Jonathan tell Julie those critical details and Julie left them out? Or did Suzy and Jonathan omit the truth and lie to Julie? Either way, this completely shatters the credibility of the article. Declaration of facts. From July 31 to August 7, 2021, the Lamb family attended an executive retreat at the beach. Upon arrival, most of the family members explored the house, checking out all the rooms and getting a feel for the space. Pete, however, was busy focusing on unloading the car, carrying in the luggage and setting up his room with the things his wife needed prepped for their child like the pack and play. After everyone finished unpacking, the family headed to Whole Foods to stock up on groceries for the week. As they were checking out, Suzy suddenly began muttering under her breath about the man standing behind them. Her frustration quickly escalated and she started accusing the man, who was quietly looking at his phone, of inappropriately following her around the store and staring at her. Suzy's accusations grew louder, causing a scene that left everyone, including the man, visibly uncomfortable. Rachel, trying to de-escalate the situation, asked Suzy to calm down and explain what was happening. Suzy insisted that the man had been trailing her throughout the store. Some of the family, caught off guard by the outburst, wasn't sure how to respond. In an attempt to diffuse the tension, they brushed it off and quickly tried to change the subject, feeling embarrassed by the confrontation. What wasn't evident at the time was that this unsettling episode was the beginning of a troubling pattern of behavior. Jonathan and Suzy's kids' bunk room became such a topic of conversation on this trip. They were a huge hit with the kids. On one side of the room there was an ocean view, and on the other side of the room there was what they called a city view, which was really just a view of the street. Their son, who was 8 years old at the time, was sleeping on the city view side and said he liked that side better. Before Pete and his wife got married, he lived in a high-rise condo downtown. So when their son wanted to sleep on the city view side, which many would think was the less desirable side, Pete would comment on it, telling their son he missed his city view and he thought that was a great choice. Some of the family disagreed and said they would choose the ocean side, which is the side Jonathan and Suzy's daughter slept on. One afternoon, some of the family was in the kitchen talking. Pete was holding his baby, who happened to be super fussy. Whenever his baby got fussy, he would walk around with the baby and change environments, and most of the time the baby would calm down. So in an effort to do that, Pete said to Jonathan and Suzy's son, in front of everyone that was there, including Suzy, "Hey, give me a tour of your room. I want to see this city view you keep telling us about." Their son was really excited and happily took Pete upstairs to show him the space. Jonathan and Suzy's daughter went along with them at the same time. As Pete is holding his child, their son showed Pete the ocean view and then of course over to see his city view, which he was so proud of. While Pete was reaching over to open the blinds to see the city view, Jonathan and Suzy's daughter got undressed on the other side of the room behind them and was changing changing into her swimsuit for the day to go to the beach. At that exact time, Jonathan walked up and saw his daughter changing and exploded at Pete and accused him of doing something inappropriate even though his back was completely turned and he was holding his child. Totally taken off guard and confused at Jonathan's over-the-top reaction towards him, Pete immediately apologized and said, "Sorry man, I had no idea she was changing, my back was turned, I'm sorry." There are critical details in this account that were intentionally omitted to manipulate the narrative. A 5-year-old child changing into her swimsuit for the day while her 8-year-old brother was present and Pete was holding a fussy baby is not child sexual abuse. Yet these key facts were conveniently left out to craft a misleading headline. Jonathan and Suzy deliberately twisted the facts of this innocent situation to fit a narrative they've been pushing for months. But the truth is, their claims don't hold up under scrutiny. Logically speaking, if Pete had any inappropriate intentions, why would he openly ask Jonathan and Suzy's son for a tour of the bunk room in front of Suzy? Someone with harmful intent wouldn't announce such a request so blatantly. Furthermore, why would Pete choose to hold a fussy baby, guaranteed to draw attention with noise, while allegedly planning something inappropriate? And why would he do this in the presence of an 8-year-old boy who is clearly old enough to recall and report what he would have witnessed? These omissions and distortions aren't just irresponsible. They're a calculated and deliberate attempt to smear someone's reputation without evidence. The reality is, their allegations lack any basis or substance. Jonathan and Suzy knew that if these critical facts were included, their narrative would fall apart. To sustain their false accusations, they intentionally left out key details, twisting an innocent situation to appear far more sinister than it truly was. This is further corroborated by video evidence of the room, which clearly shows the layout, including the location of their daughter's pink suitcase, the area where she would have been changing, and the positions of Pete, his baby, and Jonathan and Suzy's son on the opposite side of the room, nearly 15 feet away. The room was spacious, and the area where their daughter would have been changing was behind a dresser, making it nearly impossible to see her, even if someone had been looking in that direction, which Pete was not. His back was turned, and he was focused on holding his baby while opening the blinds to see this city view Jonathan and Suzy's son kept telling him about, which was the sole reason he went upstairs in the first place. The attempt to omit these crucial details and create a false narrative underscores their willingness to mislead and distort the truth for their own agenda. These facts reveal not only the innocence of the situation, but also the lengths to which they went to manipulate perception and smear Pete's reputation. I'm not sure if Rachel is completely trustworthy or not, but this account of what happened seems to make sense to me. And if what she said here is true, then I do also have some questions about the motives of Jonathan and Suzy if they left out some of these important details. But some people have doubts about how reliable of a source Rachel is. Also, prior to this series of posts by Rachel had made another series of posts with the purpose of casting doubt on Jonathan and Suzy's story, but her posts were heavily criticized on X for sharing pictures of the 5-year-old girl who was allegedly taken advantage of. This incident led a lot of people to turn against and distrust Rachel. I can't seem to find those posts anymore, so it's possible she has taken them down. Either that or it's just hard for me to find old posts on X. Marcus Rogers is a big Christian YouTuber who conducted an interview with Jonathan and Suzy themselves, and this went pretty viral. Here are some of the highlights from that interview.
I was like, but even Robert Morris said that biblically we're right. And this is not about right or wrong, but let us have our convictions. And she goes, oh, there's a woman in Oklahoma who's about to expose Robert, so don't worry about him. And like laughed. We were like, so when you mentioned, people have dirt on each other.
I'm just being real.
That they knew.
She knew.
Jimmy had done bad things apparently at Gateway. They never uncovered him because he had dirt on Robert.
Cult-like tendencies to submit and obey against whatever conviction you have. You couldn't have a personal conviction. And at the time, I was vice president. Like, at what company do you put a tracker on the car of the vice president without informing them?
Is that even legal or?
So what do I think about all of this? Well, I'm finding that I'm not fully trusting either side. Regarding Joni and Daystar, I find it really suspicious that they're so focused on getting Jonathan and Suzy to submit and to never say anything critical of Joni or Daystar, even if they think something morally wrong is happening. And regarding Jonathan and Suzy, I do find it suspicious that Jonathan sent Joni an email saying that he would be willing to stop saying everything negative about Joni or Daystar if they just would make him president of Daystar, and that he and Suzy left out some pieces of information regarding the initial story about P that I think are pretty important. I personally think I see more suspicious stuff from Joni and Daystar's side than from Jonathan and Suzy's side, but honestly, I'm not certain. There's some strange stuff from both sides. There was one random comment to Rachel's 20-part post that I find myself generally agreeing with. This person posted, I believe Pete's story. I also believe that Daystar should change its name to Wolfstar. Oh, the many, many widows you've stolen money from with your twisted false teachers and their twisted doctrines. Scammers. Even if none of this had ever happened, Daystar has always platformed numerous false teachers and promoted the heretical prosperity gospel. Daystar has always been filled with wolves in sheep's clothing, and it has always distorted the true gospel of Jesus Christ and enriched the people involved with this organization. I think that everything associated with Daystar should be completely destroyed, because this organization is bringing unbelievable shame upon the name of Jesus Christ. But just because I think Daystar is an absolutely horrible organization doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to completely support the people who are working to bring down this organization. I have some strong disagreements with people like Julie Roys and Marcus Rogers as well, such as what I think are Julie's unfair attacks upon many conservative Christians, and regarding Marcus Rogers' view of the Trinity and regarding spiritual gifts. I think what's most important here isn't really picking the right side, but rather we need to keep our eyes on the full truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and speak out whenever it's being distorted. Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a deacon, a husband, a father, a software engineer, and an amateur maker of videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help me in my mission to spread biblical truth, just subscribe and watch these videos until the end, which will help the YouTube algorithm recommend these videos to more people. I'm committed to using the skills and gifts God has given me to glorify Him and communicate biblical truth, and I would be so grateful if you would come be a part of what I'm building. You can visit my website at joyfulexile.com to learn more about me and what I'm working on. I hope you're having a blessed day. I will see you in the next video, and remember, this world is not our home.